The world is watching. Trump speaks in hours. The Iran ceasefire clock is ticking. Bitcoin just punched through $70,000 on a short squeeze that liquidated positions while most of America was sleeping. And XRP is sitting at 134 waiting for the one thing that moves it more than any chart pattern or technical indicator ever could. Resolution. Not a 45-day pause. Not a temporary ceasefire that kicks the uncertainty down the road. Resolution. The kind that reopens the Strait of Hormuz, brings oil back under $90, and tells every institutional allocator on Earth that the macro risk that's been compressing crypto for 6 months is over. Because here's what most people in this market don't understand. XRP's price right now is not being determined by XRP. It's being determined by a shipping lane in the Middle East, a podium in the White House, and a meeting room in the Senate Banking Committee. 3 rooms, 3 decisions. 3 outcomes that have nothing to do with blockchain technology and everything to do with whether the next $4 to $8 billion in institutional capital deploys or stays parked. Today I'm going to break down what Trump's speech could mean for markets, why the ceasefire negotiations are the single most important variable for crypto's near-term trajectory, how the Fed minutes on Wednesday create a second catalyst in the same week, and why the convergence of geopolitical resolution with the Clarity Act timeline produces a setup that XRP has never experienced before. This is not financial advice. I am sharing publicly available information for educational purposes. Always do your own research. Before we get into it, drop resolution in the comments if you believe the Iran conflict ending is the biggest catalyst for crypto in 2026. Drop Clarity Act if you think legislation matters more than geopolitics. Drop both if you see them as interconnected forces that amplify each other. Because what I'm about to walk through is the real-time intersection of war, policy, and price that's playing out right now. Welcome back. I am the calm analyst. Around here, we don't react to headlines. We decode what they mean for the asset we hold. Today, we're breaking down the geopolitical catalyst timeline, the macro mechanics that connect oil prices to crypto prices, the Fed's role in what happens next, and why the next 72 hours could determine XRP's trajectory for the rest of 2026. Let's get into it. Let me start with what just happened with Bitcoin, because the overnight move tells you something important about how compressed this market is. Bitcoin went from approximately $67,000 to above $70,000 in a matter of hours, while America slept, a 4.5% move that liquidated short positions and caught most retail traders completely off guard. That kind of move doesn't happen in a healthy liquid market. It happens in a market that is compressed, where positioning is heavily skewed to one side, where the shorts are overextended because the fear narrative has been dominant for weeks, and where a single catalyst, in this case ceasefire speculation and Michael Saylor purchasing another 4,800 BTC, triggers a cascade of liquidations that produces outsized price movement. The compression itself is the signal. When a market moves 4.5% in hours on moderate news, it's telling you that the spring is coiled, that the positioning is extreme, that the next directional move, when it comes with real conviction, will be amplified by the very compression that's been building for months. XRP at 1.34 during this Bitcoin move is exhibiting the same compression. The 1.5 to 2.0x beta to Bitcoin means XRP amplifies Bitcoin's moves. The Bitcoin recovery from $70,000 to $85,000, a 21% move, implies XRP moving approximately 30 to 40% on correlation alone. From 1.34, that puts XRP at 1.74 to 1.88 before any XRP-specific catalyst is added. And there are several XRP-specific catalysts approaching, all in the same window. If the overnight Bitcoin compression just showed you how coiled this market is, smash that like button, because compression precedes expansion, and the expansion, when it arrives, will be amplified by everything that's been building underneath the fear. Now let me break down what Trump's speech means for markets, because the president speaking during a live military conflict with direct implications for oil prices, trade routes, and global economic stability is not just political theater. It's a market-moving event. The White House confirmed that Trump has not signed off on a proposed 45-day ceasefire plan. Iran rejected reopening the Strait of Hormuz as part of ceasefire terms. The intelligence chief of the IRGC was killed in a strike this morning. The military situation is escalating even as diplomatic channels are reportedly active. Here's what matters for crypto specifically. Markets need clarity, not necessarily resolution. Clarity. When Trump speaks, the market gets one of 3 signals. Signal 1, escalation. More strikes, longer timeline, no ceasefire. Oil goes higher. Risk assets sell. Bitcoin tests $65,000 support. XRP drops toward $1.27. Signal 2. Diplomatic framework. A path to resolution without immediate ceasefire. A timeline that markets can model. Oil stabilizes. Risk assets hold current levels. The uncertainty premium decreases slightly. Signal 3. Resolution pathway. A ceasefire with conditions. The straight reopening on a defined timeline. Oil drops significantly. Risk assets rally hard because the macro headwind that's been compressing everything for months starts lifting. Bitcoin pushes towards $75,000. XRP, with its 1.5 to 2.0x beta, pushes toward 150 and attacks the 144 cost basis wall we discussed. The market is pricing signal 2 as the base case. A muddled middle where the conflict continues but doesn't dramatically escalate. That's why Bitcoin is at $70,000 instead of $65,000 or $80,000. The uncertainty itself is what's keeping the spring compressed. Any deviation from that base case, in either direction, produces outsized moves because the positioning is extreme and the compression has been building for months. Comment below. What signal do you expect from Trump's speech? Type escalation, framework, or resolution. Because the market response to this speech will set the tone for the entire week. And the entire week determines whether XRP enters the Clarity Act window with momentum or without it. Now let me connect oil to crypto because this relationship is the macro thread that most crypto analysts ignore, and it's the single most important variable right now. Oil above $100 per barrel creates inflation pressure. Inflation pressure constrains the Federal Reserve's ability to cut interest rates. Elevated interest rates maintain the opportunity cost of holding risk assets like crypto, and the opportunity cost keeps institutional capital parked in bonds and money markets instead of deploying into digital assets. That is the transmission mechanism. Oil, inflation, rates, opportunity cost, crypto flows. When oil drops, the entire chain reverses. Lower oil, reduced inflation pressure, increased probability of rate cuts, lower opportunity cost, capital rotation into risk assets, crypto inflows accelerate. The Strait of Hormuz handles approximately 20% of the world's daily oil supply. As long as it remains disrupted, oil stays elevated. As long as oil stays elevated, the Fed is constrained. As long as the Fed is constrained, the macro headwind on crypto persists. This is why the ceasefire isn't just a geopolitical story, it's a crypto story. The Strait of Hormuz is the bottleneck that connects Middle Eastern conflict to Federal Reserve policy to institutional crypto allocation. Remove the bottleneck and the entire transmission chain reverses, and the Fed minutes coming Wednesday add another layer. The minutes from the most recent FOMC meeting will reveal how the committee is thinking about the conflict's impact on inflation, the labor market's response to oil-driven cost increases, and most importantly, the conditions under which they would consider cutting rates. If the minutes signal that the Fed views the oil-driven inflation as temporary and would cut rates once the geopolitical situation resolves, the market will begin pricing rate cuts before they happen. And rate cut expectations have historically been the single most powerful catalyst for risk asset rallies. The sequence could unfold like this. Trump's speech provides clarity on the conflict. Oil responds, Fed minutes reveal the committee's thinking, the market prices the rate path, crypto positions accordingly, and XRP enters the Clarity Act window with either a tailwind or a headwind based on how these three events resolve. All in the same week. 3 catalysts, 3 days. And the outcome of all 3 feeds directly into whether XRP has the momentum to push through the 144 cost basis wall or gets pushed back to 130. Subscribe right now, hit the bell, drop a in the comments, because this week is not a normal week. 3 macro catalysts converging with the Clarity Act timeline creates the most important 7-day window XRP has faced this year. Now let me reframe the ceasefire debate, because the community is looking at this wrong. Most people are asking, do we get a ceasefire or not? Yes or no. Binary. But the reality is more nuanced. The question that matters for markets isn't whether a ceasefire happens this week, it's whether the probability of resolution increases or decreases. Markets don't price events, they price probabilities. A shift from 30% chance of resolution to 50% chance moves prices even though nothing has been resolved. Right now, the market is pricing approximately a 30 to 40% chance of meaningful resolution within 30 days. That's why Bitcoin is at $70,000 instead of $80,000. The uncertainty premium is still significant. If Trump's speech moves that probability to 50 to 60%, Bitcoin could push to $75,000 to $78,000 without a single tank stopping or a single bomb dropped, just the probability shift. and XRP at 1.5 to 2.0x beta would push toward 150 on the same probability shift. That's why every word from the podium matters, not because the words end the war, but because they shift the market's probability estimate. And probability shifts move prices before outcomes do. The 45-day ceasefire proposal that the White House says Trump hasn't signed off on is itself a signal. 12 hours ago, nobody was talking about a ceasefire plan. Now there's a specific proposal with a defined timeline being discussed at the White House level. The fact that it exists, even if it hasn't been accepted, shifts the probability distribution toward resolution. Iran rejecting the strait reopening as a condition shifts it back toward stalemate. The IRGC intelligence chief being killed shifts it toward escalation. Each new data point moves the probability, and the price moves with it in real time. This is why XRP can move 5% in either direction today on a speech that doesn't mention XRP, crypto, or blockchain even once, because the speech moves the macro probability. The macro probability moves Bitcoin. Bitcoin moves XRP. And XRP's movement determines whether the cost basis wall at 1.44 gets another attack or another reprieve. Now let me connect this to the Clarity Act. Because here's where the geopolitical and legislative timelines intersect in a way that most people haven't considered. The Clarity Act markup is targeting late April. The Senate Banking Committee has approximately 2 working weeks left. If the Iran conflict escalates this week, Senate bandwidth gets consumed by emergency debates about defense spending, oil prices, and economic impact. Floor time that could go to crypto legislation goes to war-related appropriations instead. This is the risk that the XRP community needs to understand. The Clarity Act doesn't exist in a political vacuum. It competes for the same Senate floor time as every other legislative priority. And during a military conflict, national security always takes precedence over market structure legislation. Conversely, if the conflict moves toward resolution this week, Senate bandwidth opens up. The pressure on floor time decreases. And the Clarity Act has a clearer path to markup because senators aren't being pulled into emergency sessions about oil embargoes and defense budgets. The geopolitical outcome doesn't just affect XRP's price through the macro channel. It affects XRP's legislative timeline through the political bandwidth channel. Both channels point in the same direction. Resolution is bullish for XRP on 2 separate vectors simultaneously. This is why the next 72 hours carry more weight than most people realize. Trump's speech, the ceasefire negotiations, the Fed minutes, all 3 feed into both the price channel and the legislative channel. And both channels converge on the same question. Does XRP enter the Clarity Act window with momentum, macro support, and political bandwidth, or does it enter with headwinds, compressed prices, and a Senate distracted by war? Let me also address Michael Saylor's purchase. Because 4,800 BTC is not just a headline. It's a signal about how the largest corporate Bitcoin holder reads the macro environment. Saylor bought during the fear, during the conflict, during the compression. 4,800 Bitcoin at approximately $70,000 per token. That's roughly $336 million deployed at a moment when retail sentiment was at extreme fear levels. Saylor doesn't buy randomly. He buys when his assessment of risk-reward is most favorable. Buying $336 million during a war, during elevated oil prices, during maximum fear, suggests he believes the macro headwinds are temporary and the structural case for crypto is permanent. That's the same assessment the calm investor makes for XRP. The war is temporary. Oil normalizes when the strait reopens. The Fed cuts when inflation eases. And the infrastructure that's been built during the fear, Ripple Treasury, SWIFT certification, commodity classification, 7 ETFs, 401k pathway, Clarity Act, doesn't get unbuilt when the macro clears. Saylor is buying through the fear because the infrastructure on the other side of the fear is more valuable than the fear itself. The same logic applies to XRP at $1.34 with the most comprehensive institutional build-out in digital asset history surrounding it. Let me leave you with this. The next 72 hours contain 3 macro catalysts that feed into both XRP's price trajectory and its legislative timeline. Trump's speech today, the ceasefire negotiations ongoing, the Fed minutes Wednesday. None of these events are about XRP specifically. All of them affect XRP directly. Through the oil to inflation to rates to flows transmission chain, through the political bandwidth channel that determines whether the Clarity Act gets Senate floor time, and through the probability shifts that move the market before outcomes are confirmed. XRP at 134 during maximum geopolitical uncertainty, with the most comprehensive institutional infrastructure ever assembled, with the Clarity Act approaching its final window, with ETF inflows at record April pace, With Rakuten onboarding 44 million users, with the 144 cost basis wall weakening under sustained buying pressure, this is the moment where the macro and the micro converge. The war ends, the macro clears, the legislation passes, the institutional capital deploys, the wall breaks, and the price catches up to the infrastructure. The only question is timing, and the timing is being decided in rooms that have nothing to do with blockchain: a podium in the White House, a negotiating table between nations, a Federal Reserve conference room. Those three rooms are setting the trajectory for the asset in your wallet right now. Price is a distraction. Value is the reality. Structure is what matters. And the structure, both the institutional infrastructure and the geopolitical conditions that determine when it activates, is converging on a 72-hour window that will echo through the rest of 2026. In a market fueled by emotion and noise, we thrive on data and composure. Remember, haste leads to loss, while calm analysis leads to victory. Comment "calm analyst" below. Drop your prediction for the speech: escalation, framework, or resolution. And tell me whether you're positioned for whatever the outcome is, because the calm investor doesn't predict events, they prepare for outcomes, all of them. Like, subscribe, notifications on. I'll see you in the next one, possibly later today, live during the speech, breaking down every market reaction in real time. Stay patient, stay rational, and as we always do, we don't wait for the future, we plan for it. Peace.